When JD Powers puts together their list of the lowest initial quality of vehicle brands, we tend to sit up and listen hard. But you know what? I've got that list. And when they rank them out of numbers of hundreds of vehicles. So how many problems you typically find out of 100 vehicle selection, that is sort of their rating schedule. Now, when I look at this list, the latest for 2025, I can't help but look at them. A lot of them don't surprise me. Many of them have changed from last year. And even one, number 6 specifically, is absolutely shocking to me. Because as far as I can tell, that particular brand is absolutely come lead heads and tails above the rest in terms of overall reliability in the last few years. And so it's a little shocking to me. But let's talk about that, and I'll explain why, after I've done some research, why number 6 is in fact a little bit less surprising once you really dig into the numbers. So let's get right to it. The numbers, the worst vehicles by initial quality based on JD Power's numbers, starting with number 1, is Mercedes-Benz. Now, Mercedes-Benz traditionally has always been almost at the very bottom for quality and consumer reports, and JD Powers never ranks them very well. But the number 1, from 1 to number 10, is Mercedes-Benz with 210 problems per 100 vehicles. So on average, 2.1 issues per vehicle. Yeah, not the greatest record, and certainly one of the worst. This is the bottom of the barrel, if you will. The next one should not be of a shocker. The next one is a Chrysler. 213 problems per 100 vehicles. And Chrysler, we know, part of the Stellantis, they haven't really been accused of being quality vehicles. And why should they start now with, TIPM issues, with quality issues, engine problems, electronics, you name it? Chrysler has led the charge for some of the biggest problem areas. And it's not a shocker. The next one, number 3, is Mini. Mini, basically another spin-off of BMW. Now, BMW, we know they build very complex vehicles. Granted, a lot of their products have been getting better over the last few years. If you go back older than 2014, 2015, it was an absolute nightmare. But guess what? Mini is coming up, and BMW has been getting slightly better. Consumer Reports tends to like BMW these days a little bit more than they kind of have for a while. Mini also hasn't been selling all that well, partially because of these ratings, partially because of durability, and partially just because of the overall cost and association with BMW. People tend to shy away. It's also a very niche car. I mean, who's ultimately driving a Mini? You really have to love the brand, but Mini sits at 218 problems per 100 vehicles. The next one is Mitsubishi. Now this one here, it's not a surprise. I mean, with CVT transmissions, with the affiliation with Nissan and of course the CVT transmissions, we know there's been no shortage of problems there. Mitsubishi has not been selling a lot of vehicles, and certainly they've been struggling to stay afloat. Other markets are doing fine. North American market, I'm actually not even sure how they're still around, to be honest with you. But they're struggling with 222 problems per 100 vehicles. They're clearly not one of the better manufacturers on this list, actually quite close to the bottom. Next, working our way, is number 6. And this is the one that sort of surprises me a little bit. With a rating of 225 problems per 100 vehicles, it's clearly one of the worst that you can find in the list based on JD Power's initial quality report summary for 2025. And I often wondered, when I saw this list initially, I thought, how could that possibly be? It's a manufacturer from Japan. They make a lot of the most reputable engines, at least in the last few years. 2.5 liter, 4 cylinders, either turbos, NA engines. They still make a torque converter automatic transmission, which is wonderful when everybody's going to CVTs or dual clutches, and those are highly problematic and expensive to fix. Clearly, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of benefits to buying a Mazda. That's right, Mazda is on the list for number 6. But when I started digging into this, I started realizing it's not their engines, it's not their transmissions. There's other problems. And when you really dig into this JD list, a lot of them seems to be associated more with electrics and infotainment systems and integration of all of your applications. And see, that's where what I've seen and what I've personally heard. I know I've got friends who own Mazdas, a few of them. And Mazdas have been building a lot of great, reliable cars these days. But there's been problems, and some of the problems arise with some of the safety features, the radar, cruise control, so lane departure, lane keep assist, all of those types of features. As a matter of fact, this friend of mine just bought himself a brand new Mazda CX-50 just a few months back, has been driving it for a significant amount of time now and drives it on the daily. but has had a couple of very alarming experiences where he's driving down the road, nowhere near anybody else, and all of a sudden the car almost virtually locks up the brakes because it thinks that there's a pedestrian in the way. The worst part is he's cruising along doing 62 miles an hour on the highway and the car decides to stop on a dime. Very terrifying. And this happened a couple of times. A lot of the other features and the lights come and go, and it seems to be a bit of an alarming case of too much tech, and tech overload has really got the best of Mazda. But this isn't a Mazda specific, because the vast majority of these manufacturers, including on the good side, the vehicles that are on the top of the list, generally are associated with more electronics and technology, and more so there and a lot less in terms of the mechanics. I mean, Mazda's been building much more reliable mechanics. Their engines, the gearboxes have been pretty stout. That being said, have you heard the Mazda, their CX-90? They've had problems there with a restart. Of course, with the hybrid systems where it just shuts off, doesn't want to restart, and then you got to get it towed. So there's been some hiccups, some gremlins. Some of it's reprogramming. Some of it's sort of, working on the integration, better improvements and enhancements on firmware and software rewrites. But ultimately, Mazda is number 6 on this list and very close to the bottom of the barrel for J.D. Power. The next one, this one should not be a shocker. Volkswagen is the next one in line. 225 problems per 100 vehicles. And everybody knows there's currently a problem with the door, of course, locking and the mechanism there for the ID4. The ID Buzz has had some issues. And a lot of it's coming in the way of this transformation into the EV space for Volkswagen. But hey, I mean, what are we talking about here? We know the VAG Group, Volkswagen Audi Group have had struggles for a long time. If you say there's a couple of things that they're bad at, in my own personal experience, EA 888 engine, latest generations are good. The older first generations are terrible. Oil consumption, oil burning, timing chain problems, rattling, weird engine noises, gearbox issues as well, DSG style. But most importantly, a lot of electrics have been a failure mode. I had Volkswagens many years ago, and I had a Passat, and we had sunroof problems, electrics with the windows, and sometimes they would work and sometimes they wouldn't. And so when I hear about electric problems with Volkswagens, none of it is shocking. But they've also had their share of mechanical problems. So they're at 225 issues per 100 vehicles. Infiniti, not a surprise. See, Infiniti's struggled though, and they're digging their way out slowly, but unfortunately Infiniti's really been eliminated and reduced almost down to almost nothing. QX90, QX80, whatever that is. And they've essentially got 2 models left. And a lot of the problems before they had were related to CVTs. Now they're going back to torque converter autos, but even variable compression engines and the QX, 55s and so on. A lot of those have shown to be very problematic. So between the VC engines, between the CVT transmissions, and of course their regular gambit of electrical faults and failures, Infiniti is up there with 242 problems per 100 vehicles. Now Volvo is, on the other hand, yet the worst one. There's one more after Volvo, if you can believe this, but Volvo is sitting at 258 problems per 100 vehicles. Now Volvo, a big part of their issue were their braking systems, their tire pressure monitoring systems. There's been, their tire pressure monitor is looking more at not so much directly pressure as opposed to diameter of wheels and the change that it reflects. There's been problems with again, lane keep assist or pedestrian warning systems, a lot of electrical problems, not to mention that some of the Volvos, when you spec up and you can get a 4-cylinder that's turbocharged and supercharged and a hybrid drive and their top trim lines. And clearly that's a recipe for disaster. Way too much technology overload. So electrics, mechanics, oil consumption, you name it. Volvo, a very nice product. They make a beautiful interior and I love the way they drive. But there have been enough problems. It's a very complex vehicle. And quite frankly, at 258 problems per 100 vehicles, it's really not a surprise. And the drum roll, everybody. Here we go. The last one with 269 problems per 100 vehicles based on J.D. Power study for 2025 looks to be almost 2.7 problems. We're almost getting to 3 problems per vehicle, right? It's almost 300 problems per 100 vehicles. So that's almost 3 problems per vehicle. And that's initial studies. This isn't like after an ownership of, 10 years of how many major problems have you had. I mean, we have other processes for that. RepairPal looks at that. Consumer Reports looks at complaints from customers, but this is initial reports. And we're almost at 3 problems per 100 vehicles. That's right, and the brand and manufacturer should be of no shock, because when you're dealing with Volkswagen, what happens when you make a Volkswagen even worse? You add more tech and more luxury. That's right, Audi. Audi is the worst one. Out of 100 vehicles, 269 problems. There you have it. Hope that helps each and every one of you. If you're looking and you don't want problems, maybe steer away from this list. I've got a list coming up with some of the best vehicles and the lowest numbers of problems based on JD Power. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Thanks again. Bye-bye.